Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Future of CRE Sustainability. Today, I'm joined by Chris Laughman, Senior Director, Energy and Sustainability at Greystar. Chris, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
Chris, you're researching community-based social marketing to help improve resident participation in sustainability programs. What's the most surprising insight you've discovered about changing behavior in multifamily properties? And how can property managers use these behavioral insights to drive better environmental outcomes?
Probably the most surprising insight, I think, is that we found that we tend to overestimate motivation. We tend to underestimate friction. So like in multifamily properties, oftentimes you have highly motivated residents that don't follow through. And it's not because they don't care. It's not because it's really just because that sustainable action isn't the default. We haven't gone through and looked at how hard is it to take that action. A lot of times we're up against habits. A lot of times we're up against busy schedules. There's other things going on in the lives of that resident. So like if I take an example and I think about a resident who might want to reduce their energy use, right? Because maybe they don't want to pay as high of an electric bill, if nothing else, right? And one of the most important things or the most impactful things that they can use in their resident and their apartment unit to reduce that energy consumption is their programmable thermostat if it's equipped with such.
Yep.
In order to really engage with that thermostat, we have to understand like what are the barriers to its use? What would enable them to use it more frequently? What barriers are there? It's not simply just education. And that's been our default for years is when you move in, we hand you a one pager. It says, here's how you use it. Maybe we hand you a whole notebook of one pagers. And then it's no different than when I move into my house, right? I move into the house, I close the deal. They hand me a whole notebook full of stuff of how my house works, probably never to be read again. And really, that's maybe not really what's going on. And that's really what's neat about community-based social marketing or CBSM is it's really focusing on the behavior and why it's happening and designing an environment that makes that desired behavior easy. It may rely on social normalization or in self-reinforcement. So it's going beyond because really, honestly, as an industry, our approach to sustainability in the past has been very engineering focused. And I can put a lot of money into prop tech and I can put a device in your unit, but if you don't use it, it doesn't matter. So we've continually forgot about the people part of the equation. And that's kind of what we're trying to do is we're trying to lean into our residents and learn from them. Instead of us assuming what they know or why they act the way they act, we're actually asking them, why do you act this way? I know it's a novel.
That's novel, yeah. Now, what is your approach to getting resident buy-in when there might be some skepticism around the sustainability program?
Well, I mean, honestly, it's that same approach. You're listening. You're asking, okay, if you're skeptical about it, why? Well, what is it about it? Right? Like we're trying to peel back the onion, if you will, and understand the actual root behaviors. A lot of times we assume, and we'll back to what we assume the reason why you're wanting to reduce energy is to save money. That actually may not be the reason why they want to save energy. The reason why they want to use the programmable thermostat is because they want to save energy or they want to save money. It may be because they want it to be comfortable at night when they go to bed. They want to wake up in the morning and not be sweating when they're getting ready for work. Those are things that can be accomplished with a thermostat, with a programmable thermostat, for example. But there are also things that if we assume the whole reason they're doing is economic, we've completely missed the mark. So, and we wouldn't know that unless we sat down with residents and talked. So we've actually been doing listening sessions and meeting with residents in our apartments and asking them, and really breaking them into two groups, those who use it and those that don't. And then we're asking them, why? Why do you use it? And we're trying to walk in with no preconceived notions. And the data that we're getting from that is really rich. And I think will help us develop a strategy that will really help us, reduce the overall impact of the building. And I think it's important to note with laws such as building performance standards, it's impactful, it's important if we're going to successfully navigate these laws. We have to realize that 60% sometimes of the energy consumption is controlled by the resident. To comply with these laws is all based on whole building consumption. So if I am going to reduce the whole building consumption, but I only control 40% of it, I need the other 60% to help me. So therefore, that's why we have to look at this differently. We have to look at this like not just assume you do it for this reason, not just hand you a piece of paper and hope that you'll read it. Maybe look at the whole process. Is move-in even the right time to hand you educational material? Maybe it's 30 days after you moved in because you're getting hit with a whole lot when you move in. Maybe it's 60 days. Maybe it's a follow-up with maintenance just to see if you have any questions about your unit. So walking in with no preconceived notions and really just trying to figure out to meet the resident where they're at, and then really build a positive resident experience. And that pays back dividends, right, with the overall relationship with the resident, because now the resident feels like they belong to some place that actually cares and listens, and that hopefully shows itself in the forms of lease renewals and longevity within the community itself.
Sounds like you're solving the split incentive program by actually listening to the other party, which is
Isn't that wild?
sounds like a novel way to do it. And boy, that seems smart. How do you see building performance standards reshaping the multifamily industry over the next few years?
They've come on fairly quickly. Really, it makes sense. You have over 56, probably more than that now, jurisdictions that require building benchmarking reporting of their energy consumption. Not that you do anything about it, but just that you report it. So these 56 plus cities have your data. They know how you're performing. It's only a matter of time before they say, okay, do something about it. And I think what that's going to mean probably, and there is a political landscape, right, where this is probably going to be stickier in certain political climates and not sticky in other political climates, not to get all political, but there are differences between California and Florida, right?
Yeah.
And that's neither good nor bad. But I think what you're going to see, particularly in those climates or those political environments where there is the appetite for these type of laws, you're going to see a shift from passive compliance of just simply reporting the data and hoping that you do something about it, because that was the idea behind reporting, is that a light bulb will come on and you'll voluntarily do something about it, to actually active performance management, where you're going to need real-time data. You're going to need those occupant engagement strategies I was talking about earlier. You're going to need kind of a life cycle mindset for upgrades. This isn't going to be just once and done anymore. The whole idea about building performance is watching the building perform over time to move towards a target. So I think you're going to see them expand. I think we can all figure out where they're going to most likely expand first. But here's the interesting thing. A lot of people think that building performance measures are all about sustainability and reducing carbon, right? And certainly that's part of it. It's also about reducing the stress on the grid. Because when you think about it, every time Apple comes out with a new release, there's something else to plug into your house, right? And our plug load keeps growing and growing and growing. And now you add AI and all these other demands, new data centers that are drawing. That's making our grid susceptible of not being able to deliver the amount of energy needed. Now you have created an environment, regardless of the politics, where cities and states have to figure out a way to reduce energy consumption from those end users who are currently using it, to free it up for these new technologies and data centers and everything else. So in that sense, even places that may not do it because they're trying to reduce the carbon may actually think about this as a way to reduce the strain on the grid, so there's not as many blackouts, as many brownouts. I mean, the only other way to compensate for all that additional electrical consumption would be to build a new power plant, and those take years, sometimes decades, to even get approved. It's a lot quicker and a lot cheaper, honestly, to tell people to just quit wasting electricity in the first place, which is kind of what is the whole idea behind these. The whole idea behind it is stop spending money on stuff that you're just wasting anyway. It's back to my dad telling me to turn off the lights when I left the room. I'm not in there anymore. There's no reason to have the light on.
I like all the automations I'm seeing in that sector to help people to remember, because it should be as simple as that, but as human beings, we're too fallible.
And there's actually an interesting angle to that goes back to you're going to hear a theme from me when it comes to behavior and sustainability. But when you start automating, that first of all, it requires data
Yep.
because you have to know what's happening. But a lot of times that can become a two-way street. And when you're automating and you're collecting data and now you're starting to make it easier, you're addressing comfort, you're like making it intuitive. You also have the ability to provide feedback.
Hmm.
So now if you start providing feedback to that resident real time, like I saw a really clever invention from a gentleman out in California where there's demand and peak usage times and times that electricity is just like very expensive.
Yep.
It's confusing. Like my mother-in-law has no idea if she should turn on the dishwasher at this time or not. Am I going to pay twice the price or not? His
Hmm.
invention was literally to have a light switch that turns red when it's a time not to use it and turn green when it's a time to use it. So she doesn't need to know what time it is or what the rates are. She just needs to know, is the light switch green? I can turn on the dishwasher. And honestly, it's these simple solutions. If we quit overcomplicating it and just make it so people can understand it,
Hmm.
that's how we solve this.
That's really cool. I'm going to look into that. When we're thinking about property managers, what's the biggest misconception for them when it comes to actually implementing sustainability programs?
So I'm going to stay on theme. It's assuming that education is the issue and not understanding that there may be deeper friction that is actually causing the lack of engagement. So it goes back to assuming. So the challenge to me, in my mind, is removing the friction, not preaching the benefits.
I love that. You're managing sustainability at over 1 million units globally. What strategy consistently works across all those different markets, different regulatory environments?
So the funny thing is about that many units in as many locations as we tend to be, is nothing is consistent but inconsistency.
Yep.
I mean, and when you think about it, I mean, real estate is local. And I've said this many times in other settings. The same builder building the same literal building off of a same set of blueprints in two different sites side by side.
Hmm.
Those two buildings were performed differently.
Yep.
You're only as strong as the apprentice who connected the wires. And that apprentice may do it differently in one building than the other. So because of that, we have to, and we do start locally and then we scale up. So like when we identify behaviors, we identify cues, regulatory cues, cultural cues, whatever they are that resonate in one place. We don't just assume that they work in another place. We have to pilot it. We have to see how it works. We adapt it if it can be scaled, but we also push a lot of that to the regional level and let that region decide what works, because what works in Colorado may not work in New Mexico. Our local leaders, and that's one strength of Greystar, is having that local leadership at that in that city. So we're not managing the country from Charleston, South Carolina. We're managing your local market from that local market. The people that manage Dallas live, work, breathe, shop in Dallas. They know Dallas. They probably couldn't tell you anything about Phoenix, to be perfectly honest.
Yep.
So, and really that's been the secret. The secret is really let those markets function differently and put specialists who know those markets manage those markets.
You mentioned data. What role does data or anything else really have for you when it comes to long-term asset management and ensuring consistent performance and returns from your properties and your sustainable investments?
And data is absolutely the essential, fundamental key to everything. Without data, you don't have anything to make the decision on. So, and if you try to make a decision with bad data, you tend to make bad decisions. So, we put a premium in our quality control processes on getting as close to the original source of data as possible.
Mm.
And then we really scour it from a pretty robust data quality. I mean, literally looking for things as simple as missing dates, gaps in data, duplicate data. I mean, literally to that level, we have a lot of meters, 1 million units. You can assume every unit has a water meter, electric meter, maybe 50% of them have a gas meter, just for easy math. That's 2.5 million meters every month. So you can start imagining all these lines and lines and lines of data. You have to be proactive with that data. You have to really scour it and really scrub it and make sure it's clean so that when we push it forward to both managers, asset managers, property managers, and investors, that they can have confidence in that data so they can make the correct decision for their property. At the end of the day, I mean, Greystar certainly owns a lot of properties, but we're even bigger. And a lot of people don't realize even bigger in our business is managing other people.
Yep.
And they have to make those decisions for themselves on their properties, but they really count on us providing solid data so they can make those decisions. So one of the things that we do that's interesting, I think, not to nerd out on data because I certainly could, but we will benchmark and we will track the performance of the assets within our portfolio, and we'll watch and see what is the trend line and how does that like asset compare to other like assets. So what is normal, right? What is average? And that's sort of the way you start to identify where opportunities are, because now that you're looking at 12 months of historical performance and you've identified what the 50th percentile is, what is average. Now I can take your property's performance and compare that to average, and I can see, are you doing better or worse? And now I can start to even get back to my red green example earlier with the light switch. We can do the same thing with the data. You're the top 25% of performers. Gold star for you. We'll put a little green star. We actually call it Green Star, that program. But we'll give you a green star. Good job. We'll make sure that the property manager or the community manager who's managing that asset sees they have a green star. Vice versa, if they're in the bottom 25%, red star. Well, what's going on? Well, you're in the bottom 25% of performance compared against your peers in the same climate zone with the same building type, right? So everything's equal. So now when you're looking at 1 million units, which is across 3,200 properties, you can see, where should I focus? Because quite honestly, that level of scale has everything to do with understanding where to look. I think of that whole concept like a compass. And really, I'm using that compass to tell me which direction to go so I don't get lost. And it points me to where the opportunities are. I get a lot more bang for my buck if I'm focusing on that 25% that's inefficient than spending all my time and energy on the 25% that's already performing well. And not to say that there's not a project to be done in that other 25%, but at least it starts to allow me to figure out where to look for the biggest opportunity, for the next opportunity.
Your average real estate owner is looking to near term reduce costs, increase revenue. How do you balance that when you're trying to pitch what can sometimes be a longer term ROI timeline around sustainability investments?
I mean, so there's kind of a two-part answer. First of all, typically whenever you're identifying waste, you're reducing operational expenses, you're impacting the NOI, you're improving the profitability instantly. Because I mean, in economic environments like we have currently, where perhaps you don't have as much opportunity to increase revenue just through rent, the other way to improve property value is to reduce costs.
Yep.
Right, operational costs. So we already fill that role. So in some ways, sustainability itself is almost the definition of how to improve property or asset value. But I think the other part of this that's important, and how you look at those longer term measures, is this is more than just pure ROI. This is about asset value. So when we look at the overall impact of any measure, whether it's payback of 18 months or a payback of 5 years, you have to look at the impact of that measure on the property value. Because in reality, if we are reducing the cost of operational, if I'm providing a hedge against future energy costs because I'm putting solar on a roof and producing my own energy and no longer paying 45 cents a kilowatt in San Diego, I just increased the value of that property. So as sustainability managers, we have to start talking like that. We have to start talking about property value and our overall impact. And I think honestly that produces more meaningful and interesting conversations with asset managers, because now we're talking their language. We're talking about asset preservation. And earlier you talked about building performance standards and some of the impacts of those. Some of the impacts of those is going to be, it may no longer be a good idea to hold on to a property in a certain jurisdiction because the cost of getting it compliant is no longer going to be worth it, right? From a depending on your hold strategy and a bunch of other factors. But if that is the decision that's made, that property is going to go up for sale. And it's no different than selling a building that needs a new roof. It's a property that needs to be brought up to compliance with BPS, which is going to create opportunities. And for companies that are paying attention and being savvy and doing a good due diligence process to understand what the costs are going into it, there's going to be opportunities to really like snag some really nice properties that just need a little bit of work. And all of a sudden now you have a great property. So in other words, what I'm getting at is I think you will see properties trade most likely because somebody just doesn't want to mess with whatever this is, this BPS thing. So rather than mess with that, they're just going to, and maybe I'm wrong, but I would certainly think it has the potential of creating some interesting opportunities for investors who are looking for that value add ability. It's still out there.
You mentioned waste as a quick path to decreasing costs sometimes. So if we look at just waste and water consumption in multifamily, what are some innovative approaches you've seen to lowering those costs?
So, I mean, when it comes to waste, waste is probably the most visible item when it comes to sustainability out of all the host of sustainability stuff, because there's that dumpster, right, that you walk past your car in the parking lot. And but the thing about waste is we tend to manage waste out of making sure it doesn't become an issue for us from a managerial standpoint. And I'm not talking about Greystar in particular. I'm talking about just in general. Most companies will just say, whatever can make me not get a complaint about waste, just make that happen, right? I just don't want it to be an issue. And there's a whole bunch of reasons why, right? I mean, it's trash and it could stink and it could have other issues related to it. But what tends to happen is we don't pay attention to it. And what people don't realize is the same cost applies to a truck that goes and empties a half empty dumpster as opposed to a full dumpster. So now you're paying this full price for this truck to roll on your property, pick up the dumpster and empty it, even though it's only half full.
Yep.
You would if you waited until it was actually full. Well, and obviously, in order to make that call, you have to have some data. You have to know what is the level of it. And this is easier to do with compactors than with open tops, but it can be done with both. So that's an innovative opportunity, I think, on the waste side is to understand what is going on actually with the dumpsters and on your property, and are they being efficiently managed. The other thing that's interesting with composting when it comes to waste is over 50%. I've heard, as far as a number, I don't know if that's true or not, but up to 50% of the weight in a dumpster is often attributed to water content that's associated with food waste. If you're composting, you're getting that out of the dumpster. So now you're not paying for literally water. Let it, decompose or whatever. You're putting it into a separate stream. And now we're starting to impact that waste stream and starting to divert it away from landfills, no longer put the stress on those community landfills. The interesting thing is with waste is we all want to throw it away, but there's just, there's no such place as away. It has to go somewhere. So if it goes to landfill, that means it's taking up space and real estate that could have been something else. So if we can be efficient with that waste. With water it's interesting in the sense that water can stop because you can valve it. Obviously, electricity, not so much an option. Water, if electric's got to land somewhere or else it's going to make a big spark. So with water, you can valve it off. With water, though, when you valve off, you have the opportunity for leaks. And what a lot of people within multifamily maybe don't always realize, although the Department of Energy and EPA have done a good job educating people, the most wasteful appliance in an apartment, or actually in a home, is the toilet. And it's because it can flow water out the backside of it without even flushing if the flush valve isn't mounted right. One of the worst things that you can do in your own home is to go use the universal flush valve mount that's supposed to fit every single toilet out there, because guess what? It doesn't fit every single toilet out there. Toilets can be unique. So you need to make sure you have the right flush valve for the right toilet. Little things like impacting flush valves can actually have a big impact on the amount of water. When you take a step back and remember 65% of that waste is coming probably from the toilet. So we did this going back a few years, but we did a really cool retrofit project on a student housing property in Miami that had a 3.5 month payback.
Wow.
It was insane. I mean, like literally, like what's the catch?
Okay.
But it was all toilets. It was just the amount of, they were just, you know, yeah, it was a multi-story building, so it was a big property, but still, it was crazy that just by having the right flush valve and the right toilet, the amount of water that can be saved is high. And that was a unique situation because a lot of times in student, the water bill is the landlord's bill. So we were motivated to, eliminate that quickly, and it actually outperformed anything anybody was expecting.
You are not my first guest to bring up toilets and flush valves, so I'm starting to think of a business opportunity around that. Speaking of, what's a technology advancement that you've seen that's really changed how you approach energy management, and especially in multifamily?
So it's both a positive and a negative, and I'm going to go back to the programmable thermostat. We did some interesting research. We talked to energy professionals across the United States in late 2024, early 2025, and we did I thought, a very interesting study. We asked them, what are the 6 most impactful things a resident can do in their unit to reduce energy consumption? What are the 6 most impactful things maintenance can do? And what are the 6 most impactful things a building owner can do?
Mm-hmm.
And then we also asked, I want you to answer this question in the context of both a property in a location where the cooling load exceeds the heating load, and also in the context of a property with a location where the heating load exceeds the cooling load. We gave them no instructions or choices of what to pick. We just said, you tell us what the 6 are, because we didn't want to lead them in any direction. 100% of those energy engineers said the programmable thermostat is the most impactful thing that anyone can do inside of their own unit to reduce their consumption. I think when I think about, like what is a change that we can make, right, and what is something that we could do, what would be like figuring out a way, which is sort of what this whole CBSM thing was that we started the interview talking about, figuring out a way to increase the usage of that thermostat, whether that's, smart tools, behavior informed schedules, something that gives residents a sense of control and contribution. I mean, that's a way I think that to innovatively impact energy consumption with probably the greatest opportunity. Now, there's certainly some really other cool stuff out there, but back to the person, right? Doesn't matter if I put it in the unit if they don't use it. So, there's more than just a prop tech play here. Prop tech is important, engineering is important, but if it's if it's an instrument that requires active participation, we can't forget about the person.
How do you measure success when it comes to ESG initiatives beyond just energy and water savings, which we've talked a lot about?
Wow. I mean, honestly, success is truly building community, people feeling like they belong, people like renewing their leases, like a lot of the traditional measures, our staff staying and having longevity, our maintenance folks liking working with the residents, and our residents liking working with the maintenance folks. It's that overall sense of community that can be built when we build it on a foundation of mutual respect, and of actually genuinely caring. Because really, at the end of the day, this is really just like caring. It's like really listening, and again, to not just assuming. So
That's actually really beautiful, Chris. Yeah, I mean, providing a basic human need of housing.
their house,
Yeah, it's
shelter, and a basement.
going to the complete other side of the equation. What do CRE owners and operators need to know when it comes to Scope 3 emissions management?
So they need to know what it is, first of all. Scope 3 is essentially means everything else.
Yeah.
And the way that I've tried to educate people is I always use this example, where's the flame? By where's the flame, you think about where does the flame set when you're consuming fuel to generate energy. So if it's a scope 1, obviously, not to get real educational here, but I think it's important to touch this. Scope 1 is the flame sets on your property. right?
Mhm.
So if I am burning fuel on site, I have a fire on site, I have a furnace on site. If I have natural gas in my building, that's a scope one, right? And scope two is energy burnt someplace else, but burnt on my behalf. It's probably burnt at the energy plant, the electric plant down the road, but it's only being made because I'm demanding it to come through the wires, right? Scope three is literally everything else. So therefore, it's huge in scope. And a lot of times people don't understand the vast scope of what everything else means because it's literally everything else. The way I kind of keep that in that whole where's the flame idea is like it's when your neighbor's having a barbecue and invites you over, his emissions that he's using to create the barbecue are in his backyard and they're his scope one emissions. They're my scope three emissions. So I'm enjoying the barbecue. He
Mm.
probably wouldn't be doing it if he wasn't inviting me over. So we have to think about this through the entire value chain from supply chains. So we have over 50,000 suppliers and companies
Wow.
that do work for us, and just in the US, actually. Every single one of their scope one and scope two emissions are my scope three emissions if they're related to delivering services for me. And it doesn't mean that like 100% of their emissions are mine, but if
Right.
I account for 50% of the revenue, I probably account for 50% of their emissions too. So, I guess that's the piece that I would really stress about scope three is everybody needs to understand the scale of this. And they need to step back and figure out how are we going to calculate this? How are we going to gather this data? Of those 50,000 plus vendors, a lot of them are not big, sophisticated vendors. Are really good vendors who do a great job, who are local and take care of one town, and they're not calculating their scope one and scope two emissions. So there's an education piece that's going to have to happen with those suppliers so they even understand what to give me in the first place. And that's not even getting specific into like what product has what level. Scope three is also everything that goes into building the building, right? All the embodied emissions, the steel and the concrete and all the stuff that goes into building a building. And scope three is your waste stream and taking it to a landfill and the methane gas that's released as a result over at that landfill, but it wouldn't have happened had I not sent my trash to that landfill. So I think that would be the piece of scope three I would really want to stress that everybody needs to understand is like how vast it truly is. Also, that Rome was not built in a day. We're going to have to take this one bite at a time and start to just break it down, get as much as we can understand and comprehend, and actually quantify, and then take another scope, another bite, and then take another bite. And eventually we will get there. But some of these initiatives where they want scope three emissions for your entire company by next January, it's going to be really difficult to have meaningful numbers because this is a really, really big, complicated issue. It's an interesting issue, and it's actually really cool that like companies like Greystar, Walmart, and a lot of the big companies out there have the ability to, through our shadow, influence other companies to reduce their consumption. That's awesome, but we have to do it in a way that actually gives them a fighting chance to do it. We can't just like cram it down their throat and say you
Mhm.
must. They need to understand it first.
Thank you for that scope three education. Now, in addition to your day job overseeing sustainability across thousands of properties, you teach environmental policy and management, which is awesome. What is one concept from academia that property managers should understand?
Probably the idea of bounded rationality. And really that's a behavior theory. So I'm getting back into behavior again, right? But really what that means is people don't make perfectly informed logical decisions. They make the best decision they can based on the limited time they have to make it, based on the information they have at that time, and based on their mental bandwidth to do it with. That's important for property managers to understand that and that's why they may not pay attention to the sign. It's
Mhm.
why they may not respond to the email where we're asking them to do something. It may explain why they don't use systems the right way, right? It's not because they don't care or they're apathetic necessarily. They might be, but that might not be it. It could be because they're overloaded, they're distracted, they have life going on, right? Most of the people in an apartment, I mean, not most of the people, but a lot of the people, probably is most, they're working 8 to 5. They get home at 5 o'clock. They're tired. I know when I get home at 5 o'clock. I'm tired. I want to eat dinner, maybe watch TV. The last thing I'm thinking about is like, I wonder what I can do to reduce the energy efficiency in my apartment right now. So we kind of have to like meet people where they are and understand the shifts and design the engagement in a way that makes simple choices easy. It makes the timing of those opportunities easy. They provide clear feedback, so it's easy. And I mean, that's we as people tend to overcomplicate things. If we can just make it simple, not assume, you can hear a theme in what I'm saying, like
Yep.
assuming things, and actually just like try to meet people where they are and give them the tools so they can make the best decision that they can make. That would be the academic side coming out of behavioral theory.
So I love that. Let's talk a little bit about renewable energy. How does Greystar arrive at decisions around renewable energy investments for the properties you own or manage? And then where do you see multifamily evolving specifically around renewable energy integration?
I mean, I don't know that we necessarily look at it any differently than any other real estate type, or not just multifamily, but any real estate type.
Mm-hmm.
With any decision to make a capital improvement, you're going to look at what is the impact on valuation of the asset and what is the return on investment.
Yep.
And then we're doing that same equation, and we're wanting to make sure as a fiduciary for our clients that we're helping guide them to what is the best decision from our opinion. And then at the end of the day, to follow through with what they want to do. And if it's in our own properties, what our asset managers want to do. So we're looking at the ROI. We're looking obviously where it makes sense. A lot of times that is really controlled by local regulatory rules. Are, for example, in California, where you can do VNUM, a virtual net energy metering, and the same in Colorado. That makes a huge impact on the return. If my payback is now 5 years instead of 13 years, that does make it a more palatable project, right?
Yep.
So those are the types of decisions. I mean, honestly, when it comes to solar, there's the math side of it. Like, does it just make math sense to do,
Yep.
right? And you have to figure out where it makes the most sense. The other thing about solar energy that I think a lot of people miss, though, is it is a hedge against future energy cost increases. So once I've locked in the capital to produce energy myself on site, my cost of energy production is somewhat fixed. And the cool thing about energy that's generated from solar is that equipment typically lasts 20, 25 years. And that's not just me saying that, like that tends to be what it seems to be lasting.
Yep.
25, if I could tell you right now, if you build a house and I'm going to give you a 20 to 30-year mortgage and you are guaranteed never to pay above this rate for the next 25 years on your electric cost. And what a lot of people also don't understand when it comes to utilities is the third highest controllable expense, you know, for a property. So it's a big expense. And when it comes to the cost of running a property, so if I can kind of at least know where my expenses will be for the next 25 years, I start to have some budget surety.
Mm-hmm.
And that's important whenever I'm trying to project out into a pro forma and trying to figure out how is this going to perform? What is my hold period? And does this start to make financial sense? So there's a lot of different factors that are going to go into it. Obviously, you know, there's a lot of local things like where's the roof and how does it slant and what's the shading? I mean, there's a lot of very site specific things. And quite honestly, with the size of our portfolio, I can't get too in the weeds with any one individual property because I just don't have time. There's only a couple of us in my team. So we can't really, unless we can figure out how to replicate ourselves. I don't know how we could get too in the weeds, but I think it's the basic. It's no different than should you put a roof on the site, a new roof, right? How long's left? What's it going to cost? What's the return? What's the impact on valuation? How's it match up with the hold strategy for that asset? But I do think it's going to help you lock in and avoid some of the increased cost of energy. And, you know, I don't know when the last time is I've seen my electric bill go down.
I was just going to say the same thing.
Right. So it's actually a pretty good hedge if you can get it in place. Obviously, the cost is going to be super site specific because is it easy to put solar up or not? I don't know. It depends on all kinds of stuff. Do you need a new roof before we put it on? Does that need to be factored in? I mean, there's so many individual project level stuff that would have to be factored in. But once you have all that calculated, it becomes a math issue. Does it make sense or does it not?
Looking ahead to, say, 20, 35 years from now, if you could implement just a single change across every multifamily property in America to maximize both environmental impact and resident satisfaction, what would it be?
I'm going to go back to what I said earlier, and that is replace every single thermostat with a resident facing feedback enabled smart thermostat that can be preloaded with something that makes it easy for them. And I think that is probably the biggest thing. We solve lights. I have a light fixture above my desk here. LED lights are very efficient, right? And honestly, I could leave the light on and probably not burn that much electricity. The other big energy consumer within your residence, whether it's your house or your apartment, is the HVAC system.
Yep.
So if you can address the HVAC system, and the way that you control that is through the thermostat. So if I could only pick one thing, it would be a thermostat that is easy to use and intuitive and actually used.
Amazing. Chris, this has been an absolute pleasure having you on the show today. I really appreciate you taking the time. For anyone who wants to learn more about your specific work, your teaching, any of that, or just more about Greystar in general, where's the best place for them to go?
Probably find me on LinkedIn is probably the easiest. You can search my name. I think it's Christopher, not Chris, on LinkedIn, but you can find me there. I don't check it every day in full transparency. I don't respond to every single request I get just because there's a lot of people that reach out to me. But I'm always willing and happy to help people when I can. Just that's probably the easiest way to get a hold of me, I would say.
Wonderful. Thank you again for coming on the show. To all my listeners, thank you for tuning in to another episode of The Future of CRE Sustainability. I'll see you next time.